The afternoon sun hung heavy over Maple Street in Columbus, Ohio, turning the asphalt into shimmering waves of heat. It was the kind of perfect August Saturday that made the entire neighborhood come alive. The annual block party was in full swing. WITH Chinese letter T, a BLES laden with potato salad and watermelon, a DJ spinning classic rock from the 70s, and children's laughter echoing off the neat rows of suburban homes. Rebecca Mitchell stood near the lemonade station, chatting with her neighbor Corinne about preschool options for the fall. Her daughter Emma, 3 years old with golden curls that bounced when she ran and a constellation of freckles across her nose, was playing near the enormous inflatable bounce house that dominated the Hendersons' front lawn. Rebecca could see her pink sundress, the one with tiny butterflies embroidered on the hem, flash in and out of view as Emma chased the older kids. "She's getting so big," Corinne commented, taking a sip of her lemonade. "Wasn't she just a baby yesterday?" Rebecca smiled, that bittersweet smile every mother knows. "Tell me about it. She starts preschool in 3 weeks. I'm not ready." The music shifted to Journey's Don't Stop Believin', and someone cranked up the volume. More neighbors poured out of their houses. Old Mr. Patterson fired up another round of hamburgers on his massive grill. Teenage boys played basketball in a driveway. Everything was normal. Everything was perfect. That's when Rebecca realized she couldn't see the pink dress anymore. She stepped away from the lemonade table, craning her neck. The bounce house had at least a dozen kids inside, their silhouettes visible through the mesh walls. Emma wasn't among them. Rebecca walked faster, scanning the yard. Maybe she'd gone to the snack table. Maybe she was petting the Johnsons' golden retriever. "Emma," Rebecca called out, her voice still casual. "Emma, honey." No response. The music was too loud. Rebecca's pace quickened, her eyes darting from group to group. She checked behind the bounce house near the kiddie pool by the fence line. Her heart began to hammer against her ribs. "David," she called to her husband, who was talking sports with a group of men near the grill. He looked up, caught the expression on her face, and immediately jogged over. "What's wrong? Where's Emma? When did you last see her?" David's brow furrowed. He spun around, scanning the party. "She was right here. She was just—" His voice trailed off as the same realization that was gripping Rebecca took hold of him. "Emma," he shouted louder this time. Other parents started to notice. The music seemed too loud now, inappropriate. Someone turned it down. Corinne rushed over. "What's happening?" "We can't find Emma," Rebecca said, and hearing the words out loud made them real, made them terrifying. "She was right here 5 minutes ago." 5 minutes. Could have been 10, could have been 15. Time had become elastic and unreliable. Within seconds, the party transformed into a search operation. Fathers ran in different directions. Mothers checked every possible hiding spot. Someone looked inside cars. Someone else ran through backyards, calling Emma's name. The bounce house was evacuated and checked thoroughly. The Hendersons' house was searched room by room. Rebecca stood in the middle of the street, turning in circles, her breathing coming in short gasps. "Emma, Emma," her voice cracked, raw with rising panic. This couldn't be happening. Children didn't just disappear from block parties. Not here. Not on Maple Street, where everyone knew everyone, and the biggest crime in the past decade had been someone's garden gnomes getting stolen as a senior prank. David sprinted down the sidewalk, looking in storm drains, behind bushes, anywhere a small child might hide or fall. But he knew deep in his gut, he knew that Emma hadn't wandered off. She was cautious, maybe even overly so. She didn't talk to strangers. She held hands in parking lots. She stayed where she could see her parents. Mr. Patterson called 911. His voice was steady, but his hands shook as he held the phone. "We need police. We have a missing child, 3 years old, blonde hair, pink sundress. She's been gone maybe 20 minutes now." 20 minutes. It felt like hours. It felt like seconds. Rebecca collapsed onto the curb, her legs giving out. Corinne wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "They'll find her," Corinne whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. "She probably just wandered after a cat or something." But there were no cats, no dogs running loose, no ice cream trucks that Emma might have followed. The first patrol car arrived within 6 minutes, lights flashing but no siren. 2 officers emerged and Rebecca ran to them, grabbing the female officer's arm. "My baby! Someone took my baby. She wouldn't just leave. She wouldn't." "Ma'am, I need you to take a breath and tell me everything," the officer said calmly, pulling out a notepad. "What's your daughter's name?" Emma Rose Mitchell. She's 3. She was wearing a pink sundress with butterflies, white sandals. She has a birthmark on her left shoulder blade shaped like a heart. Rebecca's words tumbled over each other. 15 minutes later, Detective Sarah Chen arrived in an unmarked sedan. She was in her early 40s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a reputation for closing cases that others had given up on. Behind her car came a K-9 unit, a German shepherd named Max with a scarred ear from his previous work in narcotics. Chen approached the Mitchells with purposeful strides. "I'm Detective Chen. This is Officer Rodriguez and K-9 Max. We're going to find your daughter, but I need you both to focus. Can you do that?" David nodded, his arm around Rebecca's shaking shoulders. "Good. Show me exactly where Emma was when you last saw her." They walked to the bounce house. Max's handler gave the dog Emma's stuffed rabbit that David had retrieved from their car. Max's nose went to work immediately, his entire body focused and alert. He moved in a zigzag pattern across the lawn, sniffing the ground with intense concentration. The dog tracked a scent across the grass, past the lemonade table, toward the sidewalk. Then, at the curb between 2 parked cars, Max stopped. He circled twice, whined, and sat down, the signal that the trail had gone cold. Detective Chen's expression darkened. She walked to the spot and crouched down, examining the curb. Fresh tire marks, slightly wider than a standard car. A van, maybe, or a truck. She stood up and looked at the Mitchells with professional composure that didn't quite hide the concern in her eyes. "Your daughter didn't wander off," Chen said quietly. "Someone took her. We need to move fast." Rebecca's scream pierced the suburban afternoon, a sound of primal anguish that would haunt every witness for years to come. Emma wasn't lost. She was gone. The Mitchell home had transformed into a command center within 2 hours of Emma's disappearance. FBI agents in dark suits moved through the living room with quiet efficiency, setting up laptops and communication equipment on the dining table where the family had eaten breakfast that morning. Back when life was normal, back when Emma had spilled orange juice on her placemat and giggled about it. Rebecca sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket despite the August heat staring at nothing. She hadn't cried in the last hour. There were no tears left. Her body had moved beyond panic into a strange, hollow numbness. Across from her, David paced like a caged animal, his phone clutched in his white-knuckled grip, waiting for a ransom call that hadn't come. Wouldn't come, the FBI agent had gently suggested. This didn't have the hallmarks of a kidnapping for money. That made it worse, so much worse. Detective Chen stood near the window, watching the circus outside. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes extended toward the sky like metal flowers. Reporters jockeyed for position behind the police tape, their camera lights turning the evening into artificial day. Emma's face was already on every television screen in Ohio, those golden curls, that gap-toothed smile from her 3rd birthday party 2 months ago. "We need to talk about everyone who had access to Emma," Chen said, turning to face the Mitchells. Her voice was firm but not unkind. "Family, friends, service workers, teachers, neighbors, anyone." David stopped packing. "You think someone we know did this?" "Statistically, most child abductions are committed by someone familiar with the family," FBI agent Marcus Thompson interjected. He was a veteran of the Crimes Against Children unit, with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much. I know that's hard to hear, but we need to eliminate people systematically. Rebecca's mother, Patricia, sat beside her daughter holding her hand. We don't know anyone who would. She couldn't finish the sentence. The words were too horrible to speak aloud. But Chen had seen enough cases to know that monsters rarely looked like monsters. They looked like neighbors, coaches, family friends. They looked normal right up until the moment they weren't. The interviews began. Every person at the block party, 43 adults, 27 children, was questioned. Who saw Emma last? Who was standing near the bounce house? Who left the party early? Chen's team built a timeline minute by minute, cross-referencing statements and checking for inconsistencies. At 11:47 p.m., a uniformed officer knocked on the door with a tablet in hand. "Detective, we've been reviewing security camera footage from the neighborhood." He pulled up a grainy video. "This is from the Hendersons' doorbell camera at 3:42 p.m., right around the time Emma disappeared." Chen watched the footage intensely. It showed the street, cars parked along the curb, people mingling. Then for just 3 seconds, a white cargo van appeared in the frame, moving slowly down the street. Too slowly. The driver's face wasn't visible, but something about the deliberate pace made Chen's instincts flare. "Run the plate," she ordered. "Can't, angle's wrong, but watch," the officer fast-forwarded. Same van, different camera, 2 blocks over at 3:55 p.m. He showed footage from another neighbor's security system. And here at 4:03 p.m., another camera. It circled the area at least 3 times in the hour before Emma disappeared. David moved closer, squinting at the screen. "What kind of van is that?" "White Ford Transit, probably mid-2010's model," the officer replied. "Pretty common work vehicle." Chen felt the first stirring of a lead. "Get a bolo out on every white Ford Transit in the Columbus area. I want registrations cross-referenced with any sex offender lists, any priors involving children, anything." She turned to the Mitchells. "Has anyone in a white van done work at your home recently? Deliveries? Repairs?" Rebecca's eyes were unfocused, distant. David shook his head slowly, then froze. "Wait, your mother had some work done, didn't she, Rebecca, last month?" Patricia straightened. "The water heater. It broke during that heat wave in July. I had a repairman come out." "Do you remember the company?" Chen asked, her pulse quickening. "It was, oh God, what was it called?" Patricia pressed her fingers to her temples. "Something with an H. Henderson. No, Holloway Home Repairs. The man was very polite, did good work." Chen was already gesturing to an agent. "Run it, now." Within 15 minutes they had a name. Travis Holloway, age 34, owner and sole operator of Holloway Home Repairs. Drives a white 2015 Ford Transit van. Lives alone in a rental house on the outskirts of Columbus. And Chen's blood ran cold. Convicted in 2013 of child endangerment in Dayton. Served 18 months. Released on parole in 2015. "Jesus Christ," Agent Thompson muttered, already pulling up Holloway's DMV photo on his laptop. The man in the photo was thin, with hollow cheeks and dark eyes that seemed to look through the camera rather than at it. His expression was blank, almost eerily calm. Chen turned to Patricia. "Is this the man who came to your house?" Patricia's hand flew to her mouth. "Yes, that's him. Oh my God, that's him." Rebecca suddenly came to life, lurching forward to see the screen. When she saw Holloway's face, something broke inside her. A sound emerged from her throat that wasn't quite human, raw, guttural, full of a rage and despair that no parent should ever have to feel. "Did Emma ever meet this man?" Chen asked urgently. "Was she at your mother's house when he was there?" "I don't think so," Patricia stammered. "Rebecca, was Emma with you that day?" But Rebecca was hyperventilating now, her chest heaving. David grabbed her shoulders. "Breathe, baby, breathe, think. Was Emma there?" "I don't know," Rebecca screamed. "I don't remember. We're there all the time. Maybe she was outside playing, maybe he saw her." She collapsed against David, sobbing into his chest. Chen was already moving, her phone to her ear. I need units at 2847 Riverside Drive immediately. Suspect is Travis Holloway. Approach with extreme caution. Possible child abduction in progress. I want surveillance on the location now. She hung up and turned to her team. Get me a warrant. I want to tear that house apart board by board. Agent Thompson was typing furiously. Judge Morrison is still up. I'm sending the paperwork now. The next 3 hours were agony. The Mitchells sat in their living room surrounded by federal agents and detectives waiting for news. Every minute felt like an hour. Every hour felt like a lifetime. Somewhere out there, Emma was with a monster. Was she scared? Was she hurt? Was she? No, Rebecca couldn't let herself think that way. Emma was alive. She had to be alive. At 2:34 a.m., Chen's phone buzzed. She stepped outside to take the call, and when she came back in, her expression was carefully neutral, the face of someone trained to deliver bad news without showing emotion. We have the warrant, she announced. Team is moving in now. Holloway's van is in the driveway, but the house appears dark. We're going in quiet in case, she paused, in case Emma is inside. David stood up. I'm coming with you. Mr. Mitchell, I can't allow. That's my daughter, his voice cracked. If she's in there, if she's scared, she needs to hear my voice. Chen wanted to argue, but she saw the desperation in his eyes, the raw, primal need of a father to protect his child. She nodded once. You stay in the car. You don't move unless I say so. Understood. He nodded rapidly, grabbing his jacket. As they drove through the empty streets toward Riverside Drive, Chen tried to prepare herself for what they might find. In her 15 years as a detective, she'd seen crime scenes that still haunted her dreams. But nothing was worse than crimes against children. The house was a small, run-down rental in a neighborhood that had seen better days. Chain-link fences, overgrown lawns, the kind of place where people minded their own business because everyone had something to hide. SWAT team members moved into position, silent as shadows. Chen pulled on her vest and checked her weapon. Beside her, David trembled with barely contained emotion. Breach, came the command over the radio. The front door exploded inward with a thunderous crash. Police, search warrant. Officers poured inside, clearing rooms with practiced precision. Chen followed, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Living room empty. Kitchen dishes in the sink, nothing suspicious. Bathroom clear. Then the basement. The door was locked from the outside, a deadbolt that could only be opened from the hall. Chen's heart sank. That wasn't normal. She nodded to an officer who forced it open. The stairs descended into darkness. The smell hit her first, bleach, strong and chemical, the smell of someone trying to hide something. Her flashlight found the walls, the concrete floor, old furniture covered in dust. And then a smaller door, storage space maybe, also locked from the outside. Get this open, Chen ordered, her voice tight. A crowbar made quick work of the cheap lock. The door swung open to reveal a space no bigger than a closet, empty now but not untouched. On the concrete floor, visible even in the dim light, were small shoe prints in a fine layer of dust, child-sized, recent. And in the corner, barely visible, pink fabric caught on a nail, the same color as Emma's butterfly sundress. Chen turned and ran up the stairs, bursting out into the yard where Holloway was being pulled from his van in handcuffs. She got in his face, her voice deadly calm. Where is she? Where's Emma? Holloway stared at her with those empty eyes, a slight smile playing at his lips. I want my lawyer. Chen's fist clenched, every instinct screaming to break his smug face. But she was a professional. She stepped back, breathing hard. Take him in. As Holloway was shoved into a patrol car, Chen pulled out her phone. They had evidence. They had a suspect, but they didn't have Emma. And with every passing hour, the chances of finding her alive dropped exponentially. The clock was still ticking. Dawn broke over Columbus with cruel indifference, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed obscene given the nightmare unfolding below. Rebecca hadn't slept, couldn't sleep. She sat at her kitchen table, Emma's stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest, staring at her phone as if willing it to ring with good news. David had finally collapsed on the couch around 4 a.m., his body shutting down from sheer exhaustion, but even in sleep his face was twisted with anguish. Detective Chen had been up for 36 hours straight, running on coffee and determination. Travis Holloway sat in an interrogation room downtown, his lawyer beside him, saying absolutely nothing. The evidence from his house was damning. Emma had been there, that much was certain. But where was she now? Had he moved her, hidden her somewhere else? The thought that kept Chen awake, the thought she couldn't voice to the Mitchells, was darker. Had they already lost her? Search teams had expanded their radius to a 15-mile zone around Holloway's house, combing through abandoned buildings, storage units, anywhere a child could be hidden. Dive teams prepared to search nearby bodies of water. It was day 4 now, and everyone in law enforcement knew what the statistics said about children missing this long. At 6:47 a.m., Chen's radio crackled to life. "Detective Chen, this is Unit 23. We've got a 911-call female jogger on Henderson Creek Trail, about 7 miles northeast of the Holloway property. She's reporting a small child, approximately 3 to 4 years old, found near the water. Blonde hair, pink clothing." Chen's heart stopped, then hammered so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. "Is she alive?" A pause that lasted forever. "Affirmative. Child is conscious and breathing. Paramedics en route." Chen grabbed her keys and ran, not bothering with protocol, not waiting for backup. She radioed the Mitchells' house as she peeled out of the parking lot. "Get David and Rebecca to Columbus Children's Hospital. Now, we found her. We found Emma." The creek bed was swarming with emergency vehicles when Chen arrived. She pushed through the crowd of first responders, and there, sitting on the bumper of an ambulance wrapped in a silver thermal blanket, was Emma Mitchell. She was filthy, mud caked in her hair, mosquito bites covering her exposed skin, her pink sundress torn and stained. But she was alive. Her blue eyes stared vacantly ahead as a paramedic checked her vitals. "Emma," Chen breathed, approaching slowly. "Emma, sweetheart, do you remember me? I'm Detective Chen. We've been looking for you." The little girl didn't respond, didn't even blink. It was like looking at a doll, present but not there, her mind having retreated somewhere far away from whatever horrors she'd experienced. "How is she?" Chen asked the paramedic quietly. "Dehydrated, malnourished, covered in bug bites, but no obvious signs of serious physical trauma. We need to get her to the hospital for a full examination." The paramedic's voice dropped to a whisper. "But detective, she hasn't spoken a word. Not to the jogger who found her, not to us. She's completely unresponsive to questions." The jogger, a woman in her 30s named Amanda Peterson, stood nearby giving her statement to uniformed officers. "I was doing my usual morning run and I saw something pink by the water. At first I thought it was trash, maybe a discarded toy. Then it moved. When I got closer, I realized it was a little girl just sitting in the shallow water like she was in a trance. She didn't react when I called to her. I had to physically pick her up to get her out of the creek." Chen looked at the trail, then at the creek, trying to piece together how Emma had gotten here. It was miles from Holloway's house, through rough terrain. Had he dumped her here? Had she escaped somehow and wandered? The creek was only ankle deep in most places. She could have followed it for miles in her confused state. The ambulance ride to the hospital felt surreal. Emma sat strapped into the gurney, her small hands clutching the thermal blanket, her eyes fixed on nothing. Chen sat beside her, talking softly even though the child showed no sign of hearing. "Your mommy and daddy are going to be so happy to see you. They've been looking everywhere for you. You're safe now, Emma. You're safe." At the hospital, Rebecca's scream of relief echoed through the emergency room corridor. She ran to the ambulance bay as they wheeled Emma in, dropping to her knees beside the gurney. Baby, oh my baby girl. She reached for Emma's hand, tears streaming down her face. Emma looked at her mother with those empty eyes, showing no recognition, no emotion. It was as if the light that made Emma who she was had been extinguished, leaving only a shell behind. David wrapped his arms around both of them, his body shaking with sobs. You're home now, we've got you. But Emma didn't respond. She sat perfectly still as doctors and nurses descended, as they moved her to a private room, as they performed examination after examination. The medical team worked with quiet efficiency, documenting every injury, every mark, taking samples, running tests. Dr. Sarah Lynn, the hospital's chief pediatric psychologist, arrived within the hour. She was a petite woman with kind eyes and a reputation for working miracles with traumatized children. She watched Emma through the observation window, taking in the child's catatonic state, the way she didn't react even when her parents spoke to her. This is severe traumatic dissociation, Dr. Lynn explained to the Mitchells, her voice gentle but direct. Emma's mind has essentially shut down to protect her from whatever she experienced. It's a survival mechanism, but it means we have no idea what happened to her during those 4 days. She can't tell us who took her, where she was kept, or how she escaped. But she will get better, right? Rebecca's voice was desperate, pleading. She'll come back to us. Dr. Lynn chose her words carefully. Children are remarkably resilient. With proper therapy, support, and time, many children who experience trauma can heal. But Rebecca, David, you need to understand that Emma may never be exactly the same as she was before. And until she can communicate what happened, we're working in the dark. Detective Chen stood in the corner, frustration building in her chest. Holloway was in custody, but without Emma's testimony, without her being able to identify him or describe what happened, their case had holes. A good defense attorney could create reasonable doubt. The evidence from his house proved Emma had been there at some point, but not necessarily during her disappearance. Not definitively. They needed Emma to speak. They needed her to tell them the truth. But the little girl who had once chattered constantly about butterflies and rainbows and her favorite cartoons now sat in silence, trapped in a prison of her own mind. On the second day in the hospital, as doctors continued their evaluations, Dr. Lin approached Chen with an unconventional idea. I've been researching therapy techniques for traumatized children, she said, pulling up studies on her tablet. There's compelling evidence that animal-assisted therapy, particularly with dogs, can help children feel safe enough to begin communicating again. They often perceive animals as non-threatening, non-judgmental. Sometimes they'll talk to a dog when they won't talk to humans. Chen's eyes widened as understanding dawned. Max, the K-9 unit, he was there the night Emma disappeared. Dr. Lin nodded. It's worth a try. At this point we need to try everything. Chen pulled out her phone, already dialing. If there was any chance at all, that Max could reach Emma where humans couldn't, she would make it happen. Emma's silence was protecting her from the horror she'd experienced. But that same silence was also protecting a monster, and Detective Chen was determined to break through it. Whatever it took, the hospital ethics committee had debated Dr. Lin's request for 2 hours before finally approving it. Bringing a police dog into a pediatric trauma ward was unprecedented, potentially risky, and completely against standard protocol. But these weren't standard circumstances. Emma Mitchell had been sitting in that hospital bed for 3 days now, staring at walls, refusing food, not speaking, barely acknowledging her parents' presence. Traditional therapy wasn't working. Nothing was working. Detective Chen stood outside Emma's room with K-9 officer Jake Rodriguez and Max, the German shepherd who had tracked Emma's scent on the night she disappeared. Max sat at attention, his intelligent brown eyes watching Chen carefully, sensing that this assignment was different from his usual work. You understand what we're asking, Chen said to Rodriguez. This isn't a search. This isn't suspect apprehension. We need Max to be gentle, calm. We need him to help this little girl feel safe enough to talk." Rodriguez nodded, running his hand along Max's scarred ear, a souvenir from the dog's previous work in narcotics when a raid had gone wrong. Max has been through trauma himself. Dogs understand pain in ways humans sometimes don't. If anyone can reach her, he can. Through the observation window, Chen could see Rebecca sitting beside Emma's bed, reading from a picture book that Emma loved, The Very Hungry Caterpillar. Emma's eyes were open but unseeing, her small body rigid beneath the hospital blankets. David stood by the window, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, looking 10 years older than he had a week ago. Dr. Lin entered the room first, preparing the family. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, we'd like to try something different today. We're going to bring in a therapy dog, actually, the same police dog who was part of the initial search for Emma. Sometimes traumatized children respond better to animals than to people." Rebecca looked up, hope and skepticism warring in her exhausted eyes. "A dog? Emma's always liked dogs, but she's not responding to anything. How is a dog going to?" "We don't know if it will work," Dr. Lin interrupted gently. "But at this point, we need to try every avenue. Are you comfortable with this?" David moved closer to his daughter's bed, studying her blank face. "If there's any chance it helps, yes, anything." Chen and Rodriguez entered with Max walking calmly between them. The dog had been bathed and groomed that morning, his police vest replaced with a soft blue therapy vest. As soon as Max crossed the threshold, something shifted. Emma's head turned, just slightly, just a fraction, toward the door. It was the first voluntary movement she'd made in days. Rebecca gasped, grabbing David's hand. Max approached the bed slowly, his training evident in every measured step. Rodriguez kept the leash loose, letting the dog move at his own pace. When Max reached the bedside, he stopped and sat, looking up at Emma with those calm, knowing eyes. For a long moment, nothing happened. The room held its collective breath. Then Emma's right hand, the one that had been lying motionless on top of the blanket, moved. Her small fingers reached out, trembling, and touched the top of Max's head. The dog's tail wagged once, twice. He leaned his head gently into her touch. And Emma's face changed. The blank thousand-yard stare cracked just a little. Her bottom lip quivered. A single tear rolled down her cheek. "Oh, baby," Rebecca whispered, her own tears flowing freely. Rodriguez made a hand signal, and Max carefully placed his front paws on the edge of the bed, bringing his face level with Emma's. The little girl leaned forward, pressing her forehead against Max's, and for the first time in 3 days, she made a sound, a small, broken whimper that came from somewhere deep inside. Chen felt her throat tighten. She'd seen Max track fugitives through swamps, alert to hidden drugs in false compartments, take down armed suspects without hesitation. But this gentle giant offering comfort to a traumatized child, this was the most important work he'd ever done. "Emma," Dr. Lin said softly, moving closer but not close enough to break the moment. "This is Max. He's been looking for you. He's been very worried about you. Do you like Max?" Emma didn't respond verbally, but her arms wrapped around Max's neck, her face buried in his fur. The dog stood perfectly still, letting the child hold him, sensing that she needed this connection, this anchor to something that felt safe. Minutes passed. Rebecca and David watched through their tears, hardly daring to breathe. Then Emma pulled back slightly, looking into Max's eyes. Her lips moved, forming words so quiet that no one could hear them. Chen stepped closer. "Emma, sweetheart, can you say that again? It's okay. Max wants to hear what you have to say." Emma looked at Max, not at the adults in the room. She spoke to the dog as if he were the only one who could truly understand. "Bad man," she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. "Scared, dark place." The room exploded with emotion. Rebecca covered her mouth, muffling a sob. David's knees nearly buckled. Dr. Lin's eyes widened with professional excitement. This was a breakthrough, a massive breakthrough. But Chen forced herself to stay focused. They needed more. They needed Emma to identify Holloway. She carefully pulled a folder from her bag, one she'd brought hopping for exactly this moment. Inside were photographs, a photo array that included Travis Holloway's picture among 5 other men of similar age and appearance. "Emma," Chen said, keeping her voice soft and non-threatening, "I'm going to put some pictures on your bed. Can you look at them with Max? Can you show Max if you see the bad man?" Dr. Lin shot Chen a warning look. This was pushing fast, maybe too fast, but Chen needed to take the chance. Emma was talking. Emma was present. This window might not stay open long. Chen spread the 6 photographs on the blanket where Emma could see them. Generic DMV photos, all white men in their 30s, all with similar features. Travis Holloway was third from the left. Emma looked down at the photos, her hand still resting on Max's head as if drawing strength from him. Her eyes moved across the faces slowly, and Chen watched her breathing accelerate, her small body tensing. Then Emma's finger shot out, stabbing down on Holloway's photograph with sudden, violent force. "Him," she said, her voice stronger now, filled with a child's pure, uncomplicated fear and rage. "Him, bad man." But it was what Emma said next that changed everything. What she said next would become the cornerstone of the prosecution's case, the moment that would eventually echo through a courtroom and seal a monster's fate. Emma looked at Max, seeking courage from the dog's steady presence. Then she spoke 2 words that carried the weight of 4 days of horror, 2 words that she'd been too terrified to speak until this moment, 2 words that revealed a connection no one had suspected. "Uncle Travis." The room went dead silent. Uncle Travis, not the man or the bad man or a stranger, Uncle. Chen's mind raced. Emma didn't have an uncle named Travis. The Mitchell's family tree had been thoroughly investigated. David was an only child. Rebecca had one sister living in Seattle. No uncles. No Travis anywhere in the family structure. Unless someone had been lying. Chen turned slowly to face Rebecca, whose face had gone from elated to ashen white in the span of seconds. The woman's eyes were wide with something that looked like guilt, like terror, like the sudden realization that a secret she'd been keeping was about to destroy everything. "Rebecca," Chen said quietly, but with steel underneath. "Why would Emma call Travis Holloway Uncle Travis?" David turned to his wife, confusion written across his features. "What is she talking about? Rebecca, we don't have." But Rebecca had started to shake, her whole body trembling. She looked at Emma, at David, at the detectives, and then her face crumpled completely. "Oh God," she whispered. "Oh God, what have I done?" Dr. Lin quickly ushered Emma's attention back to Max, trying to shield the child from the adult drama unfolding. But Emma had retreated again, pressing her face into Max's fur as if the dog were her only refuge in a world that kept proving itself unsafe. "Rebecca," Chen repeated, her voice harder now, "I need you to tell me the truth, right now. Why does your daughter know Travis Holloway? Why does she call him Uncle?" And as Rebecca Mitchell began to speak, as the terrible truth spilled out in broken sentences and choking sobs, Detective Chen realized that this case was about to become infinitely more complicated and infinitely more damning than anyone had imagined. The monster had been hiding in plain sight, and someone in this family had let him in. The hospital room felt like it was shrinking, the walls closing in as Rebecca Mitchell's confession poured out. David stood frozen, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and then a dawning horror that made him physically step away from his wife. His full name is Travis Holloway Bennett," Rebecca said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's my half-brother from my father's affair." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Detective Chen's jaw tightened, her mind rapidly reassembling every piece of the investigation through this new, terrible lens. David made a sound, something between a gasp and a growl. "You're what?" His voice cracked. Rebecca, we've been married for 6 years. 6 years. How do you have a brother I've never heard about? Rebecca couldn't meet his eyes. She stared at her hands, twisting her wedding ring around and around her finger. It was before we met. My father had an affair when I was in high school with a woman from Dayton. She got pregnant. My mother found out and it nearly destroyed our family. When the baby was born, my father wanted nothing to do with him. The woman, Travis's mother, she moved away, took my father's last name Bennett as part of some settlement. We were told never to speak about it. It was buried, hidden, family shame. Dr. Lynn had quietly moved Emma to the far corner of the room, distracting her with Max, trying to shield the child from the adult conversation spiraling into chaos. But Chen noticed Emma's eyes kept darting toward her mother, even as she petted the dog. Children always knew when something was deeply wrong. So you have a brother, a half-brother with a criminal record, and you never thought to mention this. David's voice rose, anger overtaking shock. Rebecca, what the hell were you thinking? I didn't know about his record, Rebecca's voice broke. I swear to God, David, I hadn't seen or heard from Travis in 20 years, not since he was a baby. Then last spring he found me on Facebook. He sent me a message saying he wanted to connect, to know his family. He seemed so normal, so sincere. He said he'd always felt abandoned, that he just wanted a chance to know his sister. Chen stepped forward, her voice sharp as a blade. And you just welcomed him in. You didn't do a background check. Didn't think to mention to your husband that you were reconnecting with a long-lost relative. Rebecca flinched. I know how it sounds. I know how stupid I was, but he seemed genuinely hurt by our family's rejection. He'd grown up knowing he had siblings who wanted nothing to do with him. I felt guilty. I thought maybe I could help heal that wound. So you hired him, Chen said flatly, to do repairs at your mother's house. He said he ran a handyman business. He needed work. I thought I was helping. Rebecca's face crumpled again. My mother's water heater broke during that heat wave in July. I suggested Travis. He came over, did the work. He was professional, polite. My mother never knew who he really was. I told her he was just a contractor I'd found online. David's face had gone from red to white. Was Emma there when he was at your mother's house? The question dropped like a bomb. Rebecca's silence was answer enough. Oh my God, David breathed. Oh my God, Rebecca, you let our daughter near him. A man we hadn't vetted, a man I didn't even know existed. She was playing in the backyard. Rebecca's voice rose defensively. She barely saw him. He was in the basement working on the water heater. She ran through the kitchen once, maybe twice. He smiled at her, called her cute. That was it. That was the only interaction they had, I swear. But Chen was already pulling out her phone, pulling up Travis Holloway's arrest record. Rebecca, Travis Holloway was convicted of child endangerment in 2013. He was living with a girlfriend who had a 4-year-old daughter. He was caught taking inappropriate photographs of the child. He served 18 months and was released on parole with restrictions, including not being allowed unsupervised contact with minors. Rebecca's face went gray. I didn't know. I swear on Emma's life I didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't check, David exploded. You brought a stranger into our family, around our daughter, and you didn't do the most basic due diligence because of some misplaced guilt about a family situation that happened before you were even born. Dr. Lynn intervened, her voice calm but firm. Mr. Mitchell, I understand you're angry, but we need to keep this focused on Emma and the case. This conversation needs to continue, but not here, not in front of your daughter. Chen nodded. We're moving this to the station. Rebecca, you're not under arrest, but I need you to come with me and give a formal statement. Everything. Every interaction you had with Holloway, every message, every phone call, every time Emma might have seen him. Am I, Rebecca's voice shook, am I going to be charged with something? That depends on what the DA decides, Chen said coldly. Right now, your lack of disclosure seriously compromised our investigation and potentially endangered your daughter. So yes, there could be charges. Child endangerment at minimum. David turned away, his hands in his hair, pulling at it as if the physical pain could somehow override the emotional devastation. His wife, the woman he'd built a life with, the mother of his child, had kept a secret that had led directly to their daughter's kidnapping. How did you come back from that? How did trust ever get rebuilt? Chen's phone buzzed. It was the forensics team. They'd found something else at Holloway's house, digital evidence. A laptop hidden in a false panel in the basement closet. The tech team had just cracked the password. "What is it?" Chen asked, stepping into the hallway. The forensic tech's voice was grim. "Detective, you need to see this." Holloway had been researching the Mitchell family for months. Facebook profiles, Google Earth images of their houses, work schedules. He had photographs, dozens of them, of Emma at the park, at preschool drop-off, at the grocery store. He'd been stalking her since at least May. Chen's blood ran cold. This wasn't an impulsive crime. This wasn't an opportunity that presented itself. This was planned, methodical, obsessive. "There's more," the tech continued. "We found search history from after Emma was found. He was researching child trauma, psychological disassociation, memory formation in toddlers. He was trying to figure out if Emma would remember what happened, if she could identify him." "What about the 4 days she was missing?" Chen asked. "Any indication where he kept her?" "We're working on GPS data from his phone and van. But detective, there's something else. We found a journal. Handwritten entries going back months. He writes about Rebecca, about feeling abandoned by the Bennett family, about wanting to make them understand what it felt like to lose something precious." Chen's stomach turned. He took Emma as revenge, against Rebecca, against the family that rejected him. That's what it looks like. He wanted Rebecca to feel what he felt growing up, abandoned, lost, desperate. He wanted to punish her by taking away what she loved most. Chen walked back into the hospital room where Rebecca sat with her head in her hands, David on the opposite side of the room refusing to look at her, and Emma in the corner with Max, the only creature in her world that felt safe anymore. 2 words, Uncle Travis. 2 words that had blown the case wide open. 2 words that revealed not just a crime but a family tragedy that spanned decades. Rejection, secrets, guilt, and ultimately a revenge so twisted it targeted an innocent child. Chen looked at Emma, who was whispering something to Max, her tiny hand stroking his fur. That little girl had been through hell. She'd been used as a pawn in an adult game of resentment and revenge. And now she'd have to testify. She'd have to face her abductor in court and relive her trauma so that justice could be served. "Rebecca," Chen said quietly, "you need to come with me now. We have a lot to discuss." As they led Rebecca out, David finally moved to Emma's side, dropping to his knees beside his daughter. He wrapped his arms around her carefully, as if she might break. "Daddy's here," he whispered. "Daddy's always going to be here, I promise." Emma looked up at him with those big blue eyes that had seen too much. "Uncle Travis bad," she said simply. "Yes, baby, Uncle Travis is very bad, but he can't hurt you anymore. I won't let him." But as Chen walked Rebecca Mitchell down the hospital corridor toward an uncertain future, she knew the truth. Holloway had already hurt Emma in ways that might never fully heal. And the ripples of his crime, born from decades-old family secrets and misplaced guilt, would continue destroying this family for years to come. 2 words had changed everything. Now it was up to the justice system to make sure those 2 words put a monster away forever. The Franklin County Prosecutor's Office had become a war room. Assistant District Attorney Monica Reeves sat at the head of a massive conference table covered in case files, photographs, forensic reports, and laptop computers displaying digital evidence. She was a formidable woman in her late 40s, with a reputation for never losing a case involving crimes against children. But even she looked worried. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," she said, pinching the bridge of her nose. Our entire case rests on a 3-year-old's two-word identification and circumstantial forensic evidence. The defendant's attorney is going to tear this apart." Detective Chen sat across from her, exhausted but determined. "It's more than 2 words now. Emma identified him from a photo array. She's given us additional details through therapy sessions with Dr. Lin and Max. She's told us about the dark place, about being hungry, about the door that locked from the outside. Every detail matches what we found at Holloway's house." "Details filtered through a traumatized toddler's memory and a therapy dog," Reeves countered. "You know how the defense will spin this. They'll say she was coached, that she's confusing memories, that at 3 years old she can't reliably distinguish reality from imagination." Marcus Thompson, the FBI agent who'd been working the case, leaned forward. "We have the forensics. Emma's hair and fingerprints in that basement crawl space, the pink fabric from her dress, juice boxes matching the brand the Mitchells buy. That's not circumstantial." "It proves she was in his house at some point," Reeves shot back. "Holloway's defense attorney, and they've hired Richard Kessler, one of the best criminal defense lawyers in Ohio. He's going to argue that Emma was in that house during the July repair job, that Rebecca brought her daughter along. Emma wandered into the basement, left traces there. Unless we can definitively prove those traces were left during the 4 days she was missing, Kessler will create reasonable doubt." Chen slammed her hand on the table. "He stalked her for months. We have the photos, the research, the journal entries about punishing the family." "Which demonstrates obsession and intent but doesn't prove abduction," Reeves said wearily. "Look, I want this bastard locked up for life as much as you do, but I need to know every weakness in our case before Kessler exploits it in court. What about DNA? Sexual assault evidence?" "Medical examination was negative for sexual assault, thank God," Chen replied. "But that's actually another problem. Defense will use that to argue the kidnapping theory doesn't make sense. Why take a child, keep her 4 days, then release her physically unharmed?" Dr. Lin, who'd been invited to the strategy session, spoke up. "Actually, that pattern is consistent with his psychological profile. Holloway didn't take Emma for sexual gratification. He took her for revenge against Rebecca, to make her suffer the way he suffered being abandoned by the Bennett family. The journal entries make that clear. He wanted to punish, not assault. Keeping Emma alive was part of the punishment, making Rebecca imagine what might be happening to her daughter." "Can you testify to that?" Reeves asked. "I can testify to the psychological profile, yes. But Kessler will bring in his own expert who will say something completely different." Reeves stood and walked to the window overlooking downtown Columbus. The weight of the case pressed down on everyone in the room. "What about Rebecca Mitchell? Has she been charged?" "Not yet," Chen said. "The DA is holding off until after Holloway's trial. Her testimony is crucial. She can establish the family connection, explain how Holloway had access to information about Emma's routine, schedule, the family's habits. If we charge her now, she'll lawyer up and might not cooperate." "She should lawyer up," Thompson muttered. "Her negligence directly led to her daughter's kidnapping." "Agreed," Chen said. "But we need her testimony more than we need to punish her right now. The marriage is destroyed anyway. David's filed for separation. She's lost everything already." Reeves turned back to the room. "All right, here's what we have. Emma's identification, forensic evidence placing her in Holloway's house, his stalking behavior documented digitally, the journal entries showing motive, and his criminal history establishing a pattern. What we don't have is a solid timeline proving Emma was in that house during the 4 days she was missing, not during the July repair visit." "What about the creek?" an assistant prosecutor asked. "Where Emma was found, can we connect Holloway to that location?" Chen pulled up a map on her laptop. GPS data from Holloway's phone shows he was within a mile of Henderson Creek on the afternoon before Emma was found. Cell tower pings put him in that area for approximately 40 minutes. Then his phone goes dark. He turned it off or removed the battery. He dumped her, Reeves said flatly. He knew we were closing in, so he drove her out there and left her by the creek, hoping she'd be found before she died but not soon enough to give us useful information. That's our theory, Chen confirmed. His search history from that day showed he'd been looking up how long can a child survive without food and hypothermia symptoms in toddlers. He was calculating whether she'd live long enough to be found. The room fell silent, everyone absorbing the calculated cruelty of it. There's one more thing, Thompson said, sliding a folder across the table. Background on Holloway's early life. His mother, Diane Bennett, died when he was 16. Overdose, ruled accidental. He spent his teenage years in foster care after that. The resentment toward the Bennett family, toward Rebecca's father specifically, it festered for years. He blamed them for his mother's death, for their poverty, for everything wrong in his life. Reeves flipped through the folder. So this was about more than just rejection. This was about destroying the family he felt destroyed him. Exactly. And Emma was the perfect target, Rebecca's most precious thing. The same age Holloway was when his own father rejected him. It's all psychologically connected. Dr. Lin nodded. The revenge was specifically calculated, not random, not opportunistic. He planned this for months, waiting for the right moment. Reeves closed the folder and looked around the room. Okay, here's how we proceed. We charge Holloway with kidnapping, child endangerment, and unlawful restraint. We present the forensic evidence, the digital stalking evidence, the journal, the GPS data. And yes, we put Emma on the stand. Chen's head snapped up. Monica, she's barely 4 years old now. Testifying will re-traumatize her. I know, and if there were any other way, I wouldn't do it. But Kessler will attack every piece of evidence we have. The jury needs to hear directly from Emma. They need to see her, hear her identify Holloway. It's the only way to counter the defense's argument that she's confused or was coached. What about accommodations? Dr. Lin asked. Can we have Max present? Reeves considered this. I'll petition the judge. It's unusual, but there's precedent for comfort animals in cases involving child witnesses. If Judge Morrison allows it, it might actually strengthen our case, shows the jury how traumatized Emma is, why she needs that support. Chen felt sick. The idea of putting Emma through a trial, of making her face Holloway in court, seemed cruel, but Reeves was right. Without Emma's direct testimony, Kessler would dismantle their case piece by piece. What's our timeline? Thompson asked. Arraignment is next week. Kessler will push for bail, which is absurd given the charges, but he'll try. Trial probably won't start for 3 to 4 months. That gives us time to prepare Emma, work with Dr. Lin on making the testimony as non-traumatic as possible. And if we lose? Chen asked quietly. Reeves met her eyes. If we lose, a child predator walks free and likely disappears. He has no ties keeping him in Ohio anymore. He'll relocate, change his name, and some other family will eventually suffer what the Mitchells have suffered. So we don't lose. We can't afford to. As the meeting broke up, Chen walked to the evidence board they'd constructed. Emma's smiling photo from before the kidnapping at the center, surrounded by crime scene photos, surveillance images, and a mugshot of Travis Holloway with his dead, empty eyes. 2 words, Uncle Travis, had broken the case open. Now they needed a jury of 12 to believe those words came from truth, not confusion. They needed to prove beyond reasonable doubt that the monster sitting in county jail had stolen 4 days from a little girl's life and tried to steal her future. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the clock was already ticking toward trial. 6 months had passed since Emma Mitchell was found by Henderson Creek. 6 months of therapy, nightmares, and slowly rebuilding a shattered childhood. She was 4 years old now, slightly taller, her golden curls trimmed shorter at her own request. She told Dr. Lin that the bad man had touched her hair, and she wanted it gone. The divorce between Rebecca and David had been finalized. Rebecca had pleaded guilty to child endangerment and received probation, a sentence that felt simultaneously too lenient and irrelevant compared to the prison of guilt she'd constructed for herself. Now, on a cold February morning, Franklin County Courthouse buzzed with an energy that felt almost electric. News vans lined the street 3 deep. Court TV had sent their best legal analysts. Every major network had reporters positioned on the courthouse steps. The case had become national news. The 3-year-old who identified her kidnapper to a police dog, the family secrets that enabled a predator, the upcoming testimony that could make or break the prosecution's case. Inside Courtroom 6, Judge Patricia Morrison presided with stern efficiency. She was a veteran of the bench, known for running a tight courtroom and having zero tolerance for theatrics. The gallery was packed, victims' advocates, journalists, law students, and members of the public who'd lined up at 5 a.m. for a chance at a seat. Travis Holloway sat at the defense table in a gray suit that made him look almost respectable. His attorney, Richard Kessler, was a silver-haired man with a reputation for getting the guilty acquitted through sheer brilliance and aggressive cross-examination. Kessler had already scored points during jury selection, eliminating anyone who seemed too sympathetic to children or too emotional about the case. The prosecution had spent 7 days presenting their evidence. Detective Chen had walked the jury through the investigation. Forensic experts had explained the evidence found in Holloway's basement. Digital forensic specialists had detailed the months of stalking, the photographs, the obsessive research. Rebecca Mitchell had testified, her voice breaking repeatedly as she explained the family history and her catastrophic error in judgment. The jury had seen the journal entries, heard about the GPS data, viewed the security footage of Holloway's van circling the neighborhood. But Kessler had been masterful in his cross-examinations. He'd pointed out that no witnesses saw Holloway take Emma. He'd highlighted the lack of DNA evidence, definitively proving Emma had been in that basement during the 4 missing days, rather than during the July repair visit. He'd brought in his own psychological expert, who testified that Holloway's journal entries were merely the writings of a troubled man processing childhood abandonment, not evidence of criminal intent. The case was balanced on a knife's edge, and everyone knew it. Now, on day 8, Assistant District Attorney Monica Reeves stood to call her final witness. The courtroom went absolutely silent. "Your Honor, the state calls Emma Mitchell." Judge Morrison had spent considerable time before trial reviewing Dr. Lynn's petition to allow K9 Max to accompany Emma during her testimony. Kessler had objected strenuously, calling it prejudicial, manipulative, and a transparent attempt to generate sympathy. But after reviewing precedent and consulting with child advocacy experts, Morrison had made her ruling. Max would be allowed, but with strict conditions. He would wear no police vest or identification. Emma could touch him for comfort, but the dog would remain quiet and still. The jury would be instructed that Max's presence was a therapeutic accommodation, not evidence of Emma's credibility. The courtroom doors opened. Emma walked in holding her father's hand, wearing a simple blue dress that Rebecca had picked out before the divorce, back when she still had the right to participate in such decisions. Beside Emma, K9 Officer Rodriguez walked with Max on a loose leash. The German Shepherd moved with calm dignity, his training evident in every step. The jury's reaction was immediate. Several jurors' expressions softened. One woman in the back row wiped her eyes. Kessler noticed and his jaw tightened. He knew this was a battle he was losing visually, even before Emma spoke a word. Emma was sworn in using simplified language Judge Morrison had approved. A special chair had been brought in, smaller and more child-appropriate than the standard witness box. Max lay down beside it, his head resting near Emma's dangling feet. She immediately reached down, her small hand finding his fur, anchoring herself. Reeves approached with the careful movements of someone trying not to spook a wild animal. "Hi, Emma. Do you remember me? We met a few times before today." Emma nodded, her voice barely audible. Yes. Emma, I know this is scary, but you're very brave and Max is right here with you. Okay. Another nod. Emma, do you remember last summer? Do you remember the block party at your grandmother's neighborhood? Yes. Emma's hand tightened in Max's fur. Can you tell the jury what happened that day? Emma's eyes darted around the courtroom, so many strangers, so many faces. She looked down at Max, drawing courage from his steady presence. I was playing, then, the bad man. What did the bad man do? He said I was pretty, said he had puppies in his van. Emma's voice cracked. I wanted to see puppies. Reeves felt her heart breaking but pressed forward. What happened when you went to see the puppies? No puppies. He grabbed me, put his hand on my mouth. It smelled bad. Then dark, everything dark. The jury was riveted. Several members leaned forward, hanging on every word. Emma, where did the bad man take you? Dark place under the ground. It was cold. I was scared. I cried for Mommy, but nobody came. Kessler started to rise, possibly to object, but Judge Morrison shot him a look that made him sink back down. This was a child describing trauma. There would be no interruptions. How long were you in the dark place? Emma looked confused by the question. Time had no meaning to a 3-year-old in crisis. Long time. I was hungry. I had to go potty, but there was just a bucket. It was scary. Emma, Reeves said gently, I need you to look around this courtroom. Is the bad man here today? This was it, the moment everything depended on. The courtroom held its collective breath. Emma's eyes swept across the gallery, past her father, past the jury. Then they landed on Travis Holloway sitting at the defense table. Her entire body went rigid. Her hand clenched in Max's fur so tightly that the dog whined softly. Emma, Reeves prompted, do you see the bad man? Emma's finger rose, shaking, pointing directly at Holloway. Her voice, when it came, was stronger than it had been, the voice of a child who had survived something terrible and lived to tell about it. Uncle Travis, she said clearly. That's Uncle Travis, he's the bad man. The courtroom erupted. Reporters scrambled to type on their phones. Someone in the gallery gasped. Judge Morrison's gavel came down hard. Order. But Emma wasn't finished. Looking at Holloway with eyes that seemed far too old for her face, she added words that would be replayed on every news channel that night. He said, don't tell. He said nobody would believe me because I'm little. But Max believed me. Max helped me tell. Kessler was on his feet. Your Honor, I object. That last statement is overruled, Morrison said sharply. The child is describing her experience. Continue, Ms. Reeves. But Reeves knew she'd already won this round. She could see it in the jury's faces, the anger, the sympathy, the belief. Emma's testimony had been more powerful than any forensic evidence could ever be. Emma, you're doing so well. Just a few more questions. When you were in the dark place, did Uncle Travis tell you anything else? Emma nodded, tears now streaming down her face. He said my mommy didn't want me anymore. That's why she let him take me. But that was a lie, right? Mommy wanted me. David Mitchell made a choking sound from the gallery. Rebecca, sitting in the back row as she'd been instructed, openly sobbed. That was absolutely a lie, Reeves said firmly. Your mommy and daddy love you very much. They never stopped looking for you. I know now, Emma whispered. Max showed me good dogs don't lie. Reeves glanced at the jury. Several were crying. Even the holdouts who'd seemed skeptical during earlier testimony now looked convinced. Thank you, Emma. You've been incredibly brave. I have no further questions, Your Honor. Judge Morrison looked at Kessler. Does the defense wish to cross-examine? This was Kessler's nightmare scenario. Cross-examining a 4-year-old trauma victim who'd just given devastating testimony while a therapy dog sat at her feet. Anything aggressive would alienate the jury, but not cross-examining meant leaving her testimony unchallenged. Kessler stood slowly. Just a few questions, Your Honor. He approached carefully, keeping his voice soft. "Emma, you're 4 years old now, correct?" "Yes." "And this happened when you were 3?" "I don't know." "You don't remember exactly when it happened?" Emma looked confused. "It was before my birthday." "And Emma, when the police showed you pictures, did they tell you which person was the bad man?" Reeves shot to her feet. "Objection, leading and inappropriate for a child witness." "Sustained," Morrison ruled. "Mr. Kessler, rephrase or move on." But the damage to his strategy was done. Kessler realized he had nowhere to go that wouldn't make him look like he was bullying a traumatized child. "No further questions," he said quietly, returning to his seat. As Emma was led out of the courtroom, still holding Max's leash, the entire gallery watched in silence. Travis Holloway's face had gone pale, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. The case wasn't over, closing arguments still remained. But everyone in that courtroom knew. 2 words from a 3-year-old had just sealed a monster's fate. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. 6 agonizing hours during which Detective Chen paced the courthouse hallways, David Mitchell sat with his head in his hands, and Monica Reeves reviewed her closing argument for the 100th time, wondering if she'd done enough. Emma had been taken home, shielded from the waiting, but her testimony echoed in everyone's minds. That small, trembling voice saying "Uncle Travis" with such devastating clarity. Richard Kessler had been masterful in his closing. He'd attacked the circumstantial nature of the evidence, emphasized the lack of eyewitnesses to the actual abduction, questioned whether a 4-year-old's memory could be trusted after months of therapy and coaching by well-meaning adults. He'd painted Travis Holloway as a troubled but innocent man, a victim himself of family rejection, whose only crime was being in the wrong place at the wrong time with an unfortunate criminal history. But Reeves had been better. She'd stood before the jury and woven every piece of evidence into a tapestry of guilt so complete that only willful blindness could deny it. The stalking photos, the journal entries filled with rage at the Bennett family, the forensic evidence, the GPS data placing Holloway near the creek where Emma was found, and most damning of all, Emma's unwavering identification. "That little girl looked into the eyes of her abductor," Reeves had said, her voice ringing through the courtroom, "and she named him. She told you the truth that he tried to silence. Uncle Travis, 2 words that will haunt that man for the rest of his life." At 4:47 p.m., the jury sent word they'd reached a verdict. The courtroom filled rapidly, the same crowd that had been there all week, plus a few new faces drawn by the announcement. Emma wasn't present. Morrison had ruled it unnecessary and potentially traumatic for her to hear the verdict in person. David sat in the front row, his parents on either side of him. Rebecca sat alone in the back, her face hollow, aged by guilt and grief. Travis Holloway was brought in wearing the same gray suit, but something had changed in him. The smug confidence he'd worn throughout the trial had crumbled. His shoulders slumped. His eyes darted nervously. He looked, finally, like a man who understood that his carefully constructed lies were about to collapse. Judge Morrison entered and everyone rose. "Please be seated. I understand the jury has reached a verdict." The jury foreman, a middle-aged engineer named Robert Chen, no relation to the detective, stood. "We have, Your Honor. On the charge of kidnapping in the 1st degree, how do you find?" "We find the defendant guilty." The courtroom erupted. David Mitchell's mother let out a cry of relief. Reporters rushed for the doors to break the news. Morrison's gavel came down hard. "Order, I will have order." "On the charge of child endangerment, how do you find?" "Guilty." "On the charge of unlawful restraint, how do you find?" "Guilty." Holloway's face had gone gray. His hands trembled on the defense table. Kessler placed a hand on his shoulder, whispering something, but Holloway shook his head slightly, the gesture of a man who knew it was over. Morrison looked at Holloway directly. "Mr. Holloway, you have been found guilty on all counts. Sentencing will be scheduled for 3 weeks from today. Until then, you will remain in custody without bail. Bailiff, remove the defendant." As guards approached, Holloway suddenly stood, turning toward the gallery. His eyes found Rebecca in the back row. For a moment the courtroom tensed, unsure what he would do. "You did this," Holloway said, his voice cracking with emotion. "You and your whole family. You threw me away like garbage. You made me invisible. I just wanted," his voice broke. "I just wanted to matter. I wanted you to feel what I felt." Rebecca stared at him, tears streaming down her face, but she said nothing. What could she say? Her guilt was real, her mistakes catastrophic, but Holloway's crimes were his own. "So you kidnapped a child," Morrison interjected sharply. "You terrorized an innocent 3-year-old to settle a score with adults who wronged you decades ago. There is no justification for what you did, Mr. Holloway. Remove him. Now." As Holloway was dragged from the courtroom, still trying to turn back toward Rebecca, Detective Chen felt a weight lift from her chest that she hadn't even realized she'd been carrying. It wasn't satisfaction exactly. There was too much damage, too much trauma for that. But it was justice. Imperfect, incomplete, but justice nonetheless. Outside the courthouse, Monica Reeves held a press conference on the steps, microphones thrust in her face from every direction. Today, justice was served for Emma Mitchell and for all children who suffer at the hands of predators. This verdict sends a clear message. We will believe children when they speak their truth, and we will pursue their abusers relentlessly. A reporter shouted, "What was it like having a 4-year-old as your star witness?" Reeves smiled, the first genuine smile she'd managed in weeks. "Emma Mitchell is the bravest person I've ever met. She faced down her abductor and told the truth when it mattered most. With the help of a remarkable therapy dog named Max, she found her voice. That courage is what won this case." 3 weeks later, Judge Morrison's courtroom was full once again for sentencing. Holloway's attorney had filed for leniency, citing his client's traumatic childhood and abandonment issues. The defense psychologist had prepared a lengthy report about how rejection and isolation had warped Holloway's development, creating a man capable of terrible decisions, but deserving of compassion and rehabilitation. The prosecution had their own presentation, a victim impact statement that would be read by David Mitchell, speaking on behalf of his daughter, who was too young to fully articulate her own trauma. David stood at the podium, his hands gripping the edges to keep them steady. "Your Honor, my daughter Emma is 4 years old. She should be worried about what color crayons to use or whether it's going to rain on her birthday. Instead, she has nightmares every single night. She's afraid of white vans. She panics in dark rooms. She asks me constantly if the bad man can get out of jail. She's in therapy 3 times a week and will be for years, maybe for the rest of her life." His voice grew stronger, fueled by a father's rage. "Travis Holloway didn't just kidnap my daughter for 4 days. He stole her innocence, her sense of safety, her childhood. He used her as a weapon against my ex-wife for crimes Emma had nothing to do with. He is not a victim. He is a predator who made calculated choices every single day for months, stalking my daughter, planning her abduction, and executing it with precision. Then he kept her in darkness and fear while her family searched desperately, not knowing if she was dead or alive." David's eyes locked on Holloway. "You don't deserve compassion. You don't deserve a second chance. You deserve to spend the rest of your life in a cage, knowing what it feels like to have your freedom taken away, just like you took Emma's." Judge Morrison listened impassively, then turned to Holloway. "Mr. Holloway, do you wish to make a statement before I impose sentence?" Kessler whispered urgently to his client, but Holloway pushed his lawyer's hand away. He stood, and for the first time since his arrest, looked genuinely remorseful, though whether it was remorse for his actions or merely for getting caught, no one could say. "I never meant to hurt Emma," he said quietly. I needed Rebecca to understand, to feel what I felt. I know that doesn't make it right. I know I destroyed that little girl's life. I'll have to live with that." Morrison's expression remained stern. "Mr. Holloway, your actions were not those of a man seeking understanding or justice for childhood wrongs. They were the calculated actions of a predator who used a child as an instrument of revenge. Your remorse, such as it is, comes only after being caught and convicted." She consulted the sentencing guidelines before her, then looked up. "On the charge of kidnapping in the first degree, I sentence you to 25 years in state prison. On the charge of child endangerment, 10 years to run consecutively. On the charge of unlawful restraint, 5 years to run consecutively. Total sentence, 40 years in the Ohio State Penitentiary with no possibility of parole for 35 years. The gavel came down with finality. 40 years. Travis Holloway would be 74 years old before he could even be considered for release. As guards led him away, Holloway looked back one final time, not at Rebecca, but at the empty seat where Emma had testified weeks before. Whatever he was thinking remained locked behind his expressionless face as he disappeared through the doors. 6 months after the sentencing, Detective Chen received an invitation to a small gathering at the Mitchell home, or rather, David's home now. Rebecca had moved to another state, seeking a fresh start somewhere her past wasn't known, though she would carry the guilt of her choices forever. When Chen arrived, she was greeted by an unexpected sight. Emma, now almost 5 years old, playing in the backyard with Max. The K-9 officer had officially retired from the police force, and after extensive discussions with Chen and Rodriguez, David had been allowed to adopt him. Max had saved Emma once through his gentle presence in the hospital. Now he was saving her again, one day at a time, just by being there. Emma saw Chen and ran over, no longer the silent, traumatized child from the hospital bed. "Detective Chen, look, Max learned a new trick," she demonstrated proudly as the German Shepherd performed a flawless playbow on command. Chen knelt down to Emma's level. "That's wonderful, Emma. How are you doing?" Emma considered the question with the seriousness only a child could manage. "Sometimes I have bad dreams, but Daddy says it's okay to be scared sometimes, and Max sleeps in my room, so I'm not alone." "That sounds very brave," Chen said softly. "Max is the bravest," Emma corrected. "He helped me use my words when I was too scared. Dr. Lin says using your words is important." David joined them, carrying lemonade. He'd aged in the past year, new gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes, but there was something lighter about him too, the weight of uncertainty replaced by the hard-won peace of survival. "Thank you for coming," he said to Chen. "I wanted you to see her, to see that she's healing." Chen watched Emma return to playing with Max, the little girl's laughter floating across the yard. "She's remarkable. You both are." "We have good days and bad days," David admitted. "The therapy helps. Max helps more than anything. And Emma's started preschool, actual preschool this time. She's making friends, learning to trust again." "And you?" Chen asked gently. David's smile was sad but genuine. "I'm learning too. Learning that you can't protect your children from everything, but you can be there when the world breaks. You can help them put the pieces back together." As Chen left that evening, she thought about the case that had consumed her life for months. About the 2 words, Uncle Travis, that had broken it wide open. About the little girl who'd been brave enough to speak her truth to a therapy dog when she couldn't speak it to humans. About the family that had been shattered by secrets and was now slowly rebuilding on a foundation of painful honesty. Justice had been served in a courtroom, but healing, real healing, was happening in backyard moments with a retired police dog and a father who refused to let his daughter's story end in tragedy. Emma Mitchell would carry scars from her ordeal. The nightmares might never fully stop, but she was alive, she was speaking, she was laughing. And somewhere in an Ohio prison, Travis Holloway would spend the next 4 decades knowing that the child he'd tried to silence had spoken loud enough to ensure he'd never hurt anyone again. 2 words had delivered justice, but a lifetime of love, therapy, and one very special dog was delivering something even more important: hope. And for Emma Mitchell, that was enough.